Hey everybody, it's Sonic again. This is our third installment of Sonic's Screencast. It's been a while, but here we are again. Let's get right to it. Today we're going to talk about cells. Hopefully you're watching this after you have done the first two parts of your homework and you are familiar with the basic organelles in a cell. But what I want to do today is use this screencast to give you some better understanding of the functions of each of the organelles by analogizing them to different parts of a city, if you will. And it's a good way to kind of understand how they work. So I have this diagram here that I'm going to, it looks like a city, and we're going to use this to kind of run through it real quickly. So we'll start here with the cell wall. So imagine this would be a plant cell because only plant cells have cell walls, animal cells do not. And it is the outer structure to the city. It is the thing that, yes, gives support and a boundary to the cell, but it also keeps things out that aren't supposed to come in. Here you have the cell membrane, which are represented here by the guard and the gate. In a cell, they are openings that allow things to come into and out of the cell. It's actually selectively permeable, which means that it allows some things in, some things out, and it chooses the way it's going to regulate those particles, and much like the guard here would do with the front gate. Let's jump down to the ribosome. It's pronounced, again, ribosome, not ribosome. And it is the construction site because it is, you could also call it a factory. I think another good analogy would be the factory, but they are the structures, small structures located throughout any cell responsible for the construction of proteins. Proteins are not food. Proteins are better compared to building blocks, enzymes, antibodies, things that help transport messages and help with chemical reactions throughout the cell. They're actually made up of long molecule chains called amino acids. And ribosomes create these proteins, these amino acid chain proteins, so that the cell can function properly, whether it's repairing some structural damage or whether it's making sure a process works throughout the cell, promoting a chemical reaction, as I mentioned before, or even sometimes storing things. The ribosomes create proteins that help the cell in so many different ways. So not food, but more structural and process particles, and the ribosomes create those. The endoplasmic reticulum, you'll see diagrams refer to them as rough and smooth. Rough have ribosomes on them, smooth do not, but they're not really labeled as such here. Think of this road here going between each of them. Within the cell, there is a cytoskeleton that kind of gives it an internal structure, but really and sometimes those are used for transport as well, but really what we have are this structure that's very near the nucleus, filled with passageways. And there are materials like proteins that travel through the endoplasmic reticulum. So in a city, you can think of them as the passageways or roads that go through the city. The Golgi apparatus, sometimes called the Golgi complex, sometimes called the Golgi bodies, are referred to here by the transport company. The post office could also be, or the UPS store, FedEx, the company that packages materials and uses the endoplasmic reticulum in times to send things around. A lot of times you'll see it attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, but the Golgi apparatus sometimes moves around and packages things into and out of the cell. The mitochondrion is singular for mitochondria. That is, very simply put, the powerhouse of the cell, the power plant of the cell. It creates energy via a chemical reaction called respiration that involves a molecule called adenosine triphosphate, ATP. That chemical, combined with glucose within a cell, undergoes a process that creates energy that the cell needs for all of the processes to work. Moving on, you have the chloroplast. Again, this is a plant cell. So the chloroplast is necessary for photosynthesis to take place. It is where chlorophyll is combined with sunlight and water and CO2 to create the aforementioned glucose. Glucose is the food that the cell needs in order to function. So in other words, the food created here in the food processing plant is sent over to the power plant to create energy. Moving over now to the lysosome, we have the waste disposal plant. The lysosome is typically found in great abundance within an animal cell, and in a plant cell, not as many. And within this animal cell, within this plant cell, a lysosome has still got the same function it does in an animal cell, which is to break down and take waste materials and expel them from the cell. The nucleus is the center of the cell. It is the command center that holds the identity, the DNA. It is what the cell is and how it exists and how it functions all comes from the nucleus. The nucleus directs the cell and it controls everything within the cell. And so within the city, we refer to it as the government, the city hall, if you will. Moving on to the right-hand side, you see vacuole. In plant cells, you typically have one large centralized vacuole that contains mainly water, but sometimes it contains food as well, glucose. And when that water drains, the plant wilts. And when you fill that water up in a plant, its vacuoles fill up within all of its thousands of cells, and then the plant perks up again. Within animal cells, there are vacuoles, but there tend to be, instead of one large centralized vacuole, a lot of little ones. But they are both storage areas for the cell. And here in the city, they are storage tanks, as you can see. So now we've run through all the different parts of a cell and analogized them to those parts within a city. So hopefully that is starting to fill in the blanks as to the structures and what their functions are within the cell. Again, as you continue to have any questions, please bring them to my attention. When we check our homework on Thursday would be a great time to do it, and we can hopefully clear things up. So folks,